Once upon a time, in a faraway land, there was a sage. He was a very wise man. And because of this, the king asked him to perform a very difficult task. What the sage had to do was take a piece of very important, very expensive glass from one side of the kingdom to the king's palace on the other side of the kingdom. The sage knew this was going to be a difficult journey. He had to cross a large desert, a big river, and massive mountains. So the sage wrapped up the glass, put it in his pack, and off he set. And at the end of the first day, he arrived at the desert. This was the largest desert the sage had ever seen. There was sand as far as the eye could see in all directions, and he knew he could never walk across that desert. But as luck would have it, he came across a camel. So he got on the camel and he got on the camel and rode across the desert. The journey took a couple of days. When he arrived at the far side, he decided he came across a river. And it was the biggest river that he'd ever seen. There was water as far as the eye could see. And the sage knew he couldn't take the camel across the river. So he built a boat and sailed across the river. When he arrived on the other side, he was met with massive mountains. Mountains higher than he'd ever seen. Mountains that looked like they touched the sky. He climbed those mountains. He climbed for days and days. And after 3 days, he reached the top of the mountains. And from there, he could almost see the world. He could see the desert. He could see the river. And in front, on the horizon, he could see the king's palace in the distance. He was so happy, he started to run down the other side of the mountains. And as he ran, he slipped. And he fell. And he tumbled. And he went head over toe, head over heels, until he stopped at the bottom of the mountains. And he thought, oh no. And he opened his pack. And he looked at the glass, and it had broken in 7 pieces. 7 pieces. There was a rectangle, triangles, a parallelogram, trapezoid, and a square. So he tried to arrange the pieces, and he tried to put them into a rectangle, but that didn't work. Then a triangle, and that was no good. A parallelogram, that was no good either. Trapezoid, but finally, he came back to the original square. So he put them in the original square, wrapped them back up in the paper and the parcel, and put them in his pack and went to the palace. When he arrived, he explained to the king what had happened. And the king was very sad, very angry. But the sage thought, what can I do? And he thought, and he showed the king how he could put the shapes together and make different forms. So the king tried. And out of all these pieces, he made lots of different shapes. And the king loved this new game. And the king decided to call the game Tangram and make it the game of his kingdom. Now, this is how the legend of Tangram was born. Thank you.